This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I've been in a bit of kind of pickle, a bit of like not really knowing what to do with this guitar. The story of this guitar goes that basically both myself and David Beebe had been chatting, and we'd been discussing like we'd never really owned a Les Paul, even though growing up it had been sort of like the Holy Grail guitar, and we were at a stage in our lives essentially where if we wanted to buy something like this, a Gibson Les Paul Standard, that we could probably afford to do it. Neither of us wanted to buy new guitars, for various reasons, but one of them being that recent kind of Gibson production is not necessarily heralded as being, necessarily all that great. Beebs have been looking at this sort of thing for a little while. We found basically a guitar very similar to this, 2002 Honeyburst, but with the 60s neck, and that was local to me, so I went and picked that up on the proviso that if Beebs liked it, he would have it. I think that one cost £1,600. That one actually probably needed some fretwork, or definitely needed some fretwork. It had quite a lot of playing on it, probably somewhere in the past. But that kind of set me on a path where I felt like, well, I quite like one of these things too. And a buddy of mine from Wales, James, this came up. I bought and sold guitars from him in the past, I think. And this one essentially was a very similar guitar, Honeyburst. The only difference really is it has the 50s neck, and it did have some Slash Alnico 2 pickups in it at the time. So both of these guitars were relatively similar in terms of weight as well. Not lightweight, sort of between £9 and £2 and £9 and £5, something like that. So way into the £9. So, not lightweight guitars, probably what you'd expect of a Les Paul, to be fair. Not too heavy, but definitely not light. Now, this kind of... It's been a bit of a strange one for me in some ways, because I did make myself stop playing Strats for a while. And when I did that, I was able to get into the Les Paul quite a lot more. And for me, there's certain things that... some of the lead playing and some of the fast kind of stretchy stuff does actually work to some degree better on a Les Paul. I had Monty's, who are up the road, put in some underspun paths. They offered to do that for, I was doing some demos for them, and they said, would you like any bits and pieces done on any of your guitars? So, they put in a 50s harness and Monty's underspun paths. So they're kind of on the lighter end of the kind of humbucker spectrum, which brings this guitar kind of closer into line with what I go for tonally anyway, as a single coil player. But it has sat in the cupboard unused for a fair while now, because when my time is kind of limited, since having a daughter about 8.5 months ago, nearly 9 months ago now, mostly my playing has been that I kind of just gravitate straight towards the blue K-Line Strat, and that feels like home. And I let James Davies borrow this down the road, and he played it for a bit, had it for a while. I didn't necessarily really miss it, and when I first picked it up, getting it back, I played it and it just felt like is this nitro is feeling kind of sticky. I'm not really loving it. I was feeling like I'm not really gelling with this guitar anymore. So I spoke to David Beebe a couple of nights ago. I said, I think it might be time for me to sell this thing. And he's actually got a friend who's on the lookout for one of these types of guitars. And, this is from an era of Gibson, which is, there seems to be, there are lots of these eras that everyone who has a Gibson maybe thinks that theirs belongs in this specific era of stuff. But anyway, the 2002, sort of before 2005 and after the 90s, there's an era there where apparently people are, fans of what Gibson were doing before they went fully off the boil for a while there. So I don't know if it kind of fits in like a moderately desirable kind of time frame. I think it's a quite well-made guitar. But David Beebe then pointed out, like, the Gibson Les Paul, especially if it's from an era where people are going to start to think, well, that is the kind of Les Paul that I might like, is probably only going to increase in value. And that's been what has happened over time, especially if you think about the early bursts and so on. Like, as those have crept up in value, there's been like a trickle-down effect to some extent, is kind of what Beebs was explaining and suggesting. And so the things that become super unobtainable, it means that the things that get knocked along down the road, something like a 2000 Les Paul Standard, which is a respectable Les Paul supposedly, might creep up in value as well, and at least hold its value. And then the other kind of consideration that I've had is that, does this keep the door closed to other Les Pauls that might try to creep into the house, you know, when you're feeling weak and you're thinking, yeah, I mean, that custom shop for $4,000 seems appealing. So I did try an R8 and I put it up alongside this, and frankly I didn't really find that there was enough of a difference to justify not sending my kid to college for it. And equally with the Murphy Lab stuff, Jake has an amazing Murphy Lab, but realistically I'm not going to be a Les Paul guy. I am always probably, I think, going to be a Strat type player. On the other hand, it's good to have a Les Paul around, and having this guitar around, which is, you know, a respectable Gibson Les Paul standard, kind of is what it is, from 2002. I think it ends up looking like quite a nice piece of guitar, enough that when I see it on a stand, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that is a Les Paul. It's not, you know, getting bashed around and getting battered. It is kind of in moderate condition. You know, there's a bit of binding that's coming away here, but I guess that could be stuck back down and remedied in that manner. It sounds like a Les Paul, you know, it does the things, it plays like one. So maybe I should just be thinking, right, well, that's what a Les Paul is. I've got an example of one in the house. I have a Gibson guitar. If I got rid of this, I wouldn't have a Gibson guitar in the house anymore. So I'm in a bit of a dilemma situation with it, where it's a bit like I'm not totally sure what I'm doing with this thing. So that's kind of, I just kind of wanted to get it out and play it. Today when I'm playing it, I'm feeling a lot more like, yeah, I like that guitar. It's a bit strange compared to the last time I played it, where I was thinking, well, that's really not doing it for me. And maybe it's just a thing that happens with certain guitars. The other thing that this did was this allowed me to sell a PRS DGT core at the time, which, you know, released a bunch of money from that, because, you know, this was about £1,000 cheaper than I was able to sell that thing for. So does this keep, you know, expensive other Gibsons out of the house? Does this keep expensive PRSs out of the house? And close a bit of the door to gas, potentially? Is that a reason enough to hang on to a guitar? It's not the best Les Paul I've played, but it's certainly not the worst, and I think it's one of the better looking ones that I've played. And would I swap it for a more recent Les Paul example? I don't think so. You know, I played that Gibson Kirk Hammett greeny thing, and to be honest, I kind of prefer this, although tonally that had some cool things going on. Certainly build quality wise, it looked quite a bit cheaper than this, with sharp edges and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this. I'm not sure, is it time to sell it? Maybe. For a few reasons, no. Maybe I should just be hanging on to this thing and play it occasionally like I do. You know, when it is time to play a Les Paul, I have a Gibson in the house. Is that a reason enough to keep it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I was using the Eric Lead 2023 preset there for cleans, mid gain and high gain. But yeah, have you enjoyed seeing this on the channel? I'd like to know your thoughts. The Gibson journey for me has been a bit of a weird one. I did have Gibson reach out to me, and they sent me some of the pedals, the Maestro pedals. I had a bit of a strange phone call where they did say, we're not looking for like negative reviews on this stuff, so, you know, if you don't like them, just send them back. So I thought that was telling. But anyway, that's just kind of where it's at for me right now. I'm wondering whether it's something I should be hanging on. Would I regret that? Don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Cheers.